into another episode of the New ID podcast. I am your host, Kuda Mic, and I'm joined today by James Abraham, CEO of MindRight, here to talk about mental health as part of our nuMind series. Now, James, how are we doing today, bro?
Kuda, I am doing really well. I wanna dive right into it, my friend. So what do you want to talk about?
I've had leadership on my mind, my bro. Leadership is something I feel like I've been around and thrust into here and there and kind of just had to figure it out as I go. So why not actually unpack what leadership is? I feel like everyone's view is quite different. What can you share about leadership from your perspective?
Well, and I don't want to answer a question with a question, but I am going to do that, unfortunately. Here, what you said,
As if
everyone's.
you don't. That's all you do.
You said everyone's perception is different. What is your perception of leadership?
I can tell you from experience, there's good leaders and bad leaders. There are people in positions of leadership with no leadership skills, which makes me think, okay, what is leadership other than maybe the responsibility of the accountability you have to ensuring that you take care of others? I guess you have followers, and it's something that you are required to kind of take into account. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah,
What's your way of
yeah.
defining it?
Well, I suppose maybe the to begin with, we have to define what is leader. What is a leader,
Mm,
right? And the basic definition of leadership, or what is a leader, according to the dictionary, is a person who guides or directs a group. That's the very simple definition
okay.
of a leader, right? Anyone who guides or directs a group.
Mm,
And
okay.
I mean, when we use that very basic definition of leader, it becomes very broad because uh, that makes a pastor at the church or a priest at a church. That's a leader, right? Or an imam.
Soccer coach,
Yeah, coach, that's a leader because everyone's
parents,
got to follow.
yeah.
Parents. So it becomes anyone who directs or guides, that's a leader.
Mm,
So that's the
mm,
basic fundamental. If we look at that definition, anyone who guides or directs. Now, you notice in the definition, it doesn't specify if people are coerced into following that person, people are
right.
forced to follow that person, or people choose to follow that person. There's no
Mm,
um, definition of how they acquire these followers. It's really just a person who guides or directs people. Tour guides are leaders.
mm, true. Hey, let's not talk down on tour guys, man. They be out here leading the way. And
Yeah,
to your point, that opens up the conversation to good leaders versus bad leaders. You know what I mean? Because there are people in positions of leadership, like I said before, who you're like, your skill set is not made for this. And you be questioning, how did you get here? Maybe those are the coercers. Maybe
yeah,
those are the ones you're like, you will follow me.
yeah,
What can
yeah.
you share from that perspective?
I think the first thing we have to do is also recognize that very few of us get trained into leadership. We're not basically, how do you become a leader, say in a company, right? You do a really good job on your own of something, and then
Mhm.
because you've done such a good job, people give you responsibilities of helping other people now do the job that you did so well, right? um, when you become a parent, you have to lead the family. Every moment is a
Yeah.
brand new moment, so you're not
Mm,
going to really be equipped necessarily to uh, to know how to handle every single situation, because almost all situations are going to be brand new situations because the variables are always changing, right? So
mm,
if we know that, then we also can safely assume then that the concept of good leadership and bad leadership is extremely nuanced because it really depends on the kind of people following you, right? Um, if I draw a
right.
blanket statement, say micromanagement is poor leadership. If I made a blanket statement like that, do you think that
Mm.
that's actually true?
There's a reason I'll share why I think it's not necessarily true, because
Okay.
at some point someone needs their handheld until they're competent at something, and then you should be able to then go, hey, you could do that on your own. It may be perceived as micromanagement
Mm-hmm.
in that sense, but it may not it shouldn't continue. I think micromanagement as just like a generic, like if you just do that all the time, that's potentially going to become toxic, negative, or whatever.
Yeah.
But would we not call it micromanagement when you're sat next to someone as they get trained up,
Yeah.
as you oversee everything?
Yeah. So then it becomes what you're saying really is about levels to this thing, right? Because
Right.
micromanagement is also work starts at 9, it's 9:01. Where have you been?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's micromanagement. And I'm saying that because I know of people whom I've worked with who've literally gone that way, right? So
True.
I think you're right. I don't think there's a fixed what is a bad leader, what is a good leader, because it really depends on the kind of people that you are taking care of, or who are under your charge, right?
Mm.
So, and when we try and say, oh well, James, there's very clear bad leaders and there's good leaders. Depends who you ask. Like we always say
True.
that I mean, it's a general consensus that Hitler was a bad guy because of what he did to the Jews, and obviously all. I mean, World War II is the war where the most number of people died in the world, right? But before Hitler became the Hitler that we all know of today, he led something called the Blitzkrieg, right? It is a war strategy that nobody believed he could do. He did it. He was very successful at it. And he had a few people who followed him, who really trusted him, right? And there was a lot of people that didn't, but there was these few that did. And when he was successful, it made him bigger. And then, he sort of...
they fully bought in at that point, hey?
Yeah, because he won something that everybody, all the other generals didn't think he could. And then that's when he sort of believed maybe his own hype, and he sort of lost track of everything. And, it all went south, right? But in that World War II, who can we say was the actual leader? There was only one. I know we say Churchill. I know we say the U.S. president at the time. I think it was Roosevelt. I don't know who. But they weren't. Like it was a very team effort from the rest of the world. There was one guy on the other side, Hitler. And by that definition, you know what I mean? By that definition, whether he was a micromanager, whether he was a visionary leader, however you describe him, he had people leading. So I think the concept of good and bad leadership is, does that person have people following him or her? And if the answer is yes, then that makes that person a leader. If I take it and apply it to today's concept, the difference between a good leader and a bad leader, or if I take it away from extreme examples, can that leader adapt to all the different personalities in their team so that they can lead the team to a sort of unanimously agreed objective, right? And I want to take it away from the extreme example. So in today's concept, leadership is, does this person have the required skills to adapt to the different personalities? And we know that there's boomers and there's millennials and there's Gen Zs. And I think there's a new one that I don't know what they're called yet. Somebody said Gen A. Is that what it's called?
We're starting again?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I know there's a new one. Somebody said it and then I couldn't remember it anymore. So the point that I make is, the key to good leadership is, can that person adapt to all the different personalities and get everybody on board to working towards a shared objective?
I totally get that. If we kind of bring it to football, in a sense, there's people who we could totally disagree with the style of play, but Mourinho's a good leader, or at least Mourinho was in his heyday one of the best at bringing people along on this cause. Hey, we're going to bank like 2 banks of 4. We're not going to be broken down, and we're going to score 1 goal, and we're going to win the game. Do you know what I mean? And it's like every player bought in. Every player, no matter how flashy they may have been, and I want to dribble people. Well, we kind of need the ball for that, and we're used to not having the ball. You know what I mean? So getting people, like you're saying, on the same page, and I'll probably add one layer and get your take on it, is do you make people better? Do you get the most out of people? And that's not using people. It's, do you inspire that extra, I want to come in and really figure this out because I believe in the vision, I believe in the work that the team is doing. And I'm not just here just doing my job. Do you know what I mean? So but then the leader is responsible for creating the atmosphere and the culture in which people feel like I want to come in and do my best, as opposed to just kind of come in and coast. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think what you're describing is the kind of leader you would like, you know?
Fair? Yeah.
I don't know that that is the blanket statement you can make for all leaders, because what you're describing is someone who comes in and as soon as they're there, they give you the impression that they've got power. You know what I mean? Like they've got that aura around them. They've got that. They've got that. As soon as they walk in, you're like, wow, I'm feeling something from this person, and you know straight away that like, yeah. And as soon as they start talking, you're like, yo, I'm buying into this person. Whatever they're saying, I'm in, right? And like you have that with your Jurgen Klopp's for football. You have
And
that
they
with
speak with
your
so much passion and fire.
yeah.
I'm in.
Yes, yes. And I mean, even for Singapore, right? When Singapore
Mm,
was, I think we're being recognized as a country for like how fast we're developing. But, and the reality is when Lee Kuan Yew first took over this country, um, we are where we are because he made a lot of decisions early on that people bought into, right? So there is that type of leadership that you're
right.
thinking about. But then there's also the other kind of leadership that is just very directive, very and that's what we call like a dictatorship, right? Do you know after World War II, the greatest conqueror that the world has ever seen is Genghis Khan? And do you think Genghis Khan was like some kind of diplomatic, democratic kind of person who was like, "What do you think, generals? What do you think we should do?" Or do you think he was more a directive dictator, like we are going to go and pillage here, but we're also going to?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like
I just read up on him, and I kind of feel like now we're talking about the wrong person here. Whichever personality test I take, I'm a Mr. Go with the flow, and I say that because I could play for Mourinho. Yes, I would love a coach who goes, arm around the shoulder, whatever. But I'm just that kind of like soldier. I'll fit in to the mold. So I may, for example, Bill Belichick. He's known for being stoic and not being that friendly or that good natured. Or these are actually, let's not say good natured. He sounds like a good man and all that stuff, but it's just like it's all work, no play.
No
I could
emotion.
exist there. No emotion. I could exist there because I understand he's also got the results. So like you're saying, sometimes you walk in and you're like, this guy's already won. He has my attention already.
Yeah.
I could kind of see myself fitting in. What kind of leader I want to be? If we're going to define it, servant leader. Get people on side by giving. Give, and then they will hopefully want to give back, and it could work out. It couldn't, but yeah, it's interesting because there are different leadership styles, isn't there?
So what you're describing here is like you try and recognize your own style. And look, what you said, servant leadership, and there's your visionary leaders, right? Like your Steve Jobs. You've got your charismatic leaders, like say Tony Robbins or a Barack Obama, right? And then you've got your dictators, and at the end of the day, it'll all come down to just two kinds of leaders, just two.
Ooh.
Now there's authoritative and there's authoritarian, right? And these two, authoritative and authoritarian, they start right at the top, and then they funnel down, and then they funnel down, and then they zigzag across each other, right? And that's where your visionary leaders come from, and that's where your charismatic leaders, your dictators, they all come, but they all start at authoritative and they start at authoritarian. That's where you decide what kind of leader do you want to be? The kind of leader that sort of commands respect, or the kind of leader that demands respect? That's how you break it down. And I can even simplify that to when you think about your home, you think about your family. When you've got a mom and dad trying to lead the house, or maybe in a more traditional sense, sometimes the father is the one who ends up leading the house because of the gender assigned role. Is he the authoritative leader or is he the authoritarian leader? And that decision will determine how the family runs, how the family grows, how it evolves through time. So it always begins with, are you commanding respect or are you demanding respect? And those decisions will determine how the rest of the people fall in line. That's how it will determine how people agree or disagree with you.
You make a very good point there, because I'm trying to think back to, and I think I understood it as, I either tell you to respect me or I earn your respect. Would that summarize it?
Spot on. Yeah, absolutely.
Well?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we all know people who are like, I am your boss, you will respect me. And the other people who you're just like, man, everything that person does, just like, I just love it. Like, there's just some people who don't need to tell you to respect them, like you said. So that's given me a lot of food for thought, man. First of all, those words sounded so familiar. I was like, he's making it up. And then you hit us up with demand and command. I was like, but those sound the same too. Like, what are we doing here? Fair.
Yeah.
I think I get it. I think I get it. Now, there's something that I've recently read about in Extreme Ownership. Amazing book.
Right.
I think it's Joko Willink and Leif Babin, I hope I'm pronouncing those correctly.
Okay.
But it just talks about the concept of owning it at every level. What can you kind of speak to around owning it and doing what I need to do first?
When we talk about, you see, what you're describing there is the leadership of self, right? And look, even when I look at the way I designed my workshops, for example, at level 1 comprises of leadership of self modules, because before you even think about leading others, you got to know how to handle you first. The better you can handle you, the easier it's going to be to adapt to others, because the others aren't influencing how you feel about you. So if you're going to handle other people's emotions and thoughts and feelings, you have to be clear that you're not projecting those insecurities out, because a lot of times that's what happens. That's why some people in leadership positions will shout at you in public, will berate you, will put you down, will hold you back. Because it's not about you, it's about their own insecurities. And we've all had bosses who've tried to hold us back or who've tried to sabotage us because it'll make them look good, not because they're trying to hurt you. It's not a personal thing. It's got a lot to do with the fact that they are just extremely insecure about their own stuff. And the rate at which you're progressing is at a level that they're uncomfortable with. And you'll notice that the bosses you respect the most, the bosses that you really sort of wish you could work longer with, are the ones who don't have that level of insecurity.
Absolutely.
They're so giving and they're so empowering, and they almost give you the permission to go be the best version of yourself. Not
mistakes included.
Yeah, precisely. They're so supportive, all of those things, and they're always trying to empower you. And I think sometimes we misunderstand the impact of empowerment. As leaders, everybody wants to feel like they're empowering people, but the true nature of empowerment is you don't take any kind of recognition. The problem with not taking any recognition is nobody validates you for the things that you do well. And as a human being, you need validation. I don't care if you're a leader or you're just starting out. You need people to validate you, to let you know, okay, you're doing the right thing. The problem is, even in leadership positions, when you try and empower someone, you don't get necessarily that validation, because the basic nature of empowerment means you don't get credit. So if you spend more time working on yourself, where you don't need that validation, you're putting yourself in a position where you can empower others, because you're not relying on the validation from them to make you feel better about yourself.
Absolutely. You make a really good point, especially with the validation thing. I was kind of feeling it out, and then you said essentially you get to the point where you work on yourself and you don't need it. But it's also like, when you get to that point where you've kind of explored that whole idea and you've got a positive and strong self-image, you realize it's not everyone's validation, if any, you need, right? It's also like the people that know or that matter, what they think of the job you've done is more important. It gets to that point where you can feel like, okay, I have a team that is thriving. I don't understand why more people don't like celebrate that. Isn't that something to be proud of?
Yeah. So, well, I'll give you something to think about, right? If
Mm,
validation was all you needed to feel good, then wouldn't the person with the most
mm.
number of likes feel amazing all the time? Wouldn't
Oh,
influencers be on top of
instinct.
the world, or
Yeah,
celebrities, or people in the who have fame, right?
yeah.
So it isn't about the external validation. We think we want it because we see it all over the place, but the truth is, it's about the
Mm,
internal validation. It is the intrinsic
right.
rewards that motivate us to keep doing what we're doing. And that's why
Mm,
leadership begins with yourself. How you focus on you. How do you know what makes you happy? It's all of those components where, like, even in the workshops, right? It's all about setting the foundations of
mm,
leadership mindset.
yeah.
Because how do you know what a leader is supposed to be? Like, you mentioned earlier, like some real examples, right? And I think we can all, when we think back, there are very clear examples, experiences of examples that we have gone through in life where we've seen somebody and gone, wow, I want that. I want to be like that. I know that there's going to be a lot more examples of I
Yeah.
don't want that. Like, a leader who's
Right.
overbearing, or who's held you back, or who's cussed you out in public, or leaders who've put you down needlessly,
Kind of like
right?
cussed you out in public.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't
Like,
like that.
or leaders who've, even in private, right, who have said things to
Mm,
you just to bring you down because they
yes.
said, look, we don't want to get you big headed. Is that how you try and control
Mm,
someone who may be big headed, to try and bring down their morale? Is there another way that you could do it without destroying the person? Because it sounds like
bro.
that's a very easy cop out from your
Yeah.
responsibilities as leadership, because you're just going, let me say something to humiliate this person so that they feel bad and therefore their head doesn't get bigger.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of lazy leadership, right? So
Absolutely.
before you begin with trying to manage everybody else, figure out yourself first. Create these and these foundations for leadership. And when you think about the things that people have done for you throughout your career, there,
Mm,
I guarantee, like, I remember that when I was in Singapore and I was playing for the football clubs here, I used to
mm,
have people always yell at me because I was a winger, and then always yell at me if I lost the ball. And then the first time I go
yeah.
to Australia and I play for a team there, and then I think I took twice. I tried to take players on, and then I didn't. I just started passing the ball off, and then I came off, and then the player was some of my teammates were like, why you stop taking players on? I said, oh, I didn't want to lose the ball. I go,
Mm,
what the hell do you think you have teammates for?
yeah.
There's 11 of us out there.
Yeah.
You're one of 11. So if you lose the ball, the rest of your team will cover for you. You're not playing this
Yeah.
game alone. So
Fact.
take the players on because we know you're capable of doing that. And then
Yeah.
if you lose it, just make sure you run back, but we'll cover you. Right. And it is that
Yeah.
mindset shift where you go, oh, wow, I didn't ever think of it that way. I never thought of it. But if you
Mm,
realize it, the person who said that to me, right, that person was empowering me.
yes.
The person was giving me safety, letting me know, hey, you can do these things because that's your job anyway on the field. So
Yeah.
I have tons of examples of amazing leaders who
Mm,
I who've shown me what kind of leader I want to be. You said earlier that you identify as a servant leader. That's
mm,
the mantra that you'd like to live by as a person in a leadership position. That's because I
yeah.
guarantee there's been people that you've seen that has gone, this is how I want to manage Kuda, and you've been inspired by that, and you've gone, that's how I want to
Yeah.
be. And then we
Yeah.
pick up on those things, and then we're also very cognizant of, well, I've also had really crappy leaders, and I want to make sure I don't
Fact.
do those things.
Yeah.
And so it's a mishmash
Yeah.
of it's all these different people whom we've come across in our lives that allows us to
Yeah.
be better. But regardless of how many different people we pull from, we got to focus on
Mm,
us first. It always
true.
begins with the self, right? And
Yeah.
that's why in the level one we focus on leadership of self. Then in level two we learn how to create better control or a better understanding of emotions, because it's called mastering emotions, because we create the foundation of resilience. Because now you know yourself. Now let's try and create some resilience, because leaders, like, this is the point I want to make with leadership. Leadership is a privilege. Leadership is not an entitlement. It feels like it's an entitlement in today's society because I've worked hard, I've done well, so give me a leadership position, give me people. Just because you've done well in your job, don't make you a person who can lead people. It's a different set
What
of
about the people
skills.
who have been here the longest? Oh, you're not qualified. I don't know how to tell you.
And again,
I wouldn't give it to you if it was up to me.
And companies try and create programs and trainings to bring these leaders up to speed. But really, I have the simplest metric. If you ever want to see if your leader is, if a person is a good leader or not, right? If you want to be honest, if a person is a good leader or not, what is the attrition rate for that leadership team?
Oh, yes. Simple metric.
Right?
Yes. And don't blame it on the industry.
No,
you.
come on. That's like saying oh, I got caught in the rain today. You could have an umbrella. You could have taken shelter. You had a lot of options. You didn't take those options. You can't control the weather. You can control the rain. You can't control the weather. You can control what you do about it. Right? So I'm of the belief that when you want to be a good leader, you focus on yourself. And when you focus on yourself, you can create the skills for resilience and all of those components that come in afterwards. But it always begins with the self. And you can say, oh, well, I got these bad people, or I got that. You got a ton of excuses, for why your team's got high attrition. Bottom line, high attrition, then you need to work on you first.
Deep. There's something that I will throw back to shortly, but can you tell us what level 3 is? Because I think level 1 is self. Level 2 was emotional resilience. What's level 3?
So level 3 is when you finally apply some of the leadership principles.
Okay.
And if you think about it, like it takes that long to just begin the application process, because before you bring out to other people concepts, make sure it applies to you first. Make sure that you understand you first, because the best way you can succeed is people, again, we go back to that first thing, right? Are you authoritarian or are you authoritative? Just the two. Do you command respect or do you demand respect? Because a person who is demanding respect has maybe not earned it yet. That's why they're demanding it. A person who commands respect, and I mean command, not like in the directive command, but a person who has that aura, and as soon as they walk in, they're like, whoa, okay, I feel this commanding presence around me, right? That person is a little bit more authoritative because they give the impression of power. So that's just then at level 3, you only get to try and apply some of the leadership principles because you now understand yourself a little bit better. So then you can apply the principles that make most sense to you. I'm not saying one or the other is wrong. I'm saying you can be a little bit more honest about which is the one that's going to work for you, because when you know what's working for you, you know how to recruit better for your team. You know how to make like,
you're gonna get the go-getters that can run with you, right?
Yes, because there's a little bit more. It goes back to that same principle. We're all working towards the same goal. We know that this guy is a directive dictator. What he says goes. It's the gospel truth when he talks. If we know that this is the guy, this is our leader, and we still choose it, then we're on board. We accept this model of leadership, right?
Yeah.
But it only can happen if that leader is honest enough with themselves. Because you can't pretend to be an authoritative leader when you're a dictator.
Yeah.
You're going to pull in the wrong people. And those people are going to be upset because they joined you because they're thinking, wow, this guy is going to inspire us, is going to command respect because he's an amazing person or she's an amazing person. Turns out they're just very directive.
Yeah.
So I think when we can begin to apply the principles at level 3, when we can begin to apply the principles, it's only when we understand what our level of resilience is, we understand how we lead ourselves. And that's where the level 1, level 2, level 3 come into play, just to create the base foundation for leadership.
Makes a lot of sense, man. The thing I wanted to go back to that I really liked when you were touching on privilege as well, leadership is a privilege. It's also a massive responsibility, and I think a lot of people think I deserve to be a leader because of X, Y, and Z. But then they get there, and it's all about them, and it's all about them, not in the I'm going to work on myself first way. It's a I deserved this and I earned this, and it's like, okay, cool. What things are you doing for the people that follow you? So
Yeah.
for example, once again, it doesn't have to all be, me. I'm all love. So usually it's how can I grow my people? How can I do this? How can I do that? But it could just be how can I get my team to succeed better than it's ever done before? Even if that's driving results, and it might be like not the right environment for someone
Yeah.
who's like, oh, I want to be inspired. If you get the right people, how can we get them to perform and get results better than ever? That's a responsibility you have to your team. Can you kind of speak on that responsibility as a leader?
So see, again, I think that that's why I said leadership is a privilege, because you've got to think about it. It's extra
Mm-hmm.
responsibility, because
Yeah.
imagine, right? You've done a really good job doing what you do, and you've done such a good job that they've now moved you into a position where they're hoping you can teach other people to do the same job that you did so that we can emulate the results, right?
Yeah.
The problem with that very basic model of thinking is those people aren't you.
Yeah.
You're not
Absolutely.
hiring clones. They're not
Mm-hmm.
replicas. They're different people with different experiences, with different skill sets.
Yeah.
So you're not going to be able to replicate the performance if you're not adapting to those different people. Now,
Mm.
I say adapting because my preferred model is authoritative. As a leader and as someone who, when I was in a position where I wanted to have leaders in front of me, I wanted a leader who was authoritative.
Mm.
I wanted a leader who knew
Right.
how to command my respect, who knew how
Yeah.
to, when he spoke, I listened, or when she spoke, I listened, because I was like, yo, I want to absorb as much as I can from you, because I
Mm.
responded well to that. But I
Yeah.
also know of people who, even as a leader myself, I know of people who like to be micromanaged, which was weird for
Yeah.
me because I'm not a micromanager. But
Yeah.
the success of me as a leader is, can I adapt those skill sets so that I can bring the best out of this person? If the answer is yes,
Yeah.
then the person is successful. If the answer is no, I know, don't hire the same kind of personality again, because I'm not good at it. It's not about that person. It's
Mm.
about me. I'm not good at it as a leader, taking on that kind of people. And that's what I mean. You have to recognize that it's a privilege to lead people like this. So if it's a
Mm.
privilege, you have to spend a little bit of time working on you.
That's deep. I loved how you took extreme ownership just then. Like I love that book, man. It's just I was, I'll touch on this briefly. I feel like I've stepped into or fallen into positions of leadership just because I'm the kind of person who goes, is no one really putting their hand up for this? Ah, okay, cool. Do you know what I mean? If there's anyone who's more like, a certain type of personality who's like, we're gonna do this, I think I'm the best soldier because if I believe in what we're about to do, I'm gonna get everyone else to believe in what we're gonna do. So, if you want to do it, you do it.
Yeah.
But then oftentimes it's like, they fell off. They didn't really want to do it. All right, guys, I'm gonna give it my best shot. So, like, I've learned things along the way that I would love to apply a bit more of, like taking ownership. Like you just did it. You're like, oh man, it's on me. I maybe hired the wrong person. I think there was a saying, and I'm probably gonna butcher it, along the lines of, if you want to get a promotion, prepare your one up for the job ahead of them, because that vacates that position.
Yeah.
So, what can you talk or what can you share about leading up and down?
I think whether it's leading up or leading down, right? Whether it's your
Mm.
internal customers, your external customers, I think it's always going to boil down to how you work on you. The better you are at understanding who you are as an individual,
Mm.
the easier it's going to be to manage up and manage down, because it's not about the egos anymore, right?
Oh,
And that's what I'm talking about when I say focusing on you first. Because when you
right.
focus on you, you're not worried about if it rains. If you have an umbrella in your bag, it doesn't matter if it rains. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? It's just about being prepared
Yeah.
for the situation. When up or down, it matters not which way this goes, because it's always going to focus
Mm.
on you.
Neat. Bro, well played on that one, yeah? I think, honestly speaking, I think that covers everything I could possibly think of, and we may have to come back to this another time. But seems to me like what it all really boils down to is getting your mind right.
So that you can live a better life.
I see what you did there. I see what you did. Hey, look, appreciate your time, man. This has been an amazing conversation. Catch you on the next one.
You know it, brother. Take care.
You too, my guy. Peace.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the New ID podcast, where we tell stories from the community. We can't do any of this without your support, and we can't thank you enough. But to help us grow, please like, comment, and subscribe, and share it with everyone you know. Tune in next time for another incredible story from the community.